Welcome to another edition of Africa Sideways. Today we got the top 10 soft roaders that can actually go off-road. This is vehicles with no low range, no official pure body on frame. This is just, as they call it, the mommy's wagon, the soft roaders. But how many of these cars can you actually take off-road to a decent level? We're talking grade 2, maybe grade 3 in places. Let's get straight into it. Number 10, bit of a favorite of mine, a car that's like a bottle of red wine that just keeps getting better and better with age. We've got the RAV4 first generation 2009 to 2013, especially the two-door version of that. On paper it's only got 190 mils of ground clearance, but if you look at it, it looks more than that. Departure angles are exceptional. Solid Toyota build quality. They got a good 2-liter petrol engine in there that just keeps on going and going. One of the strongest soft roaders ever made, and the first soft roader, you could argue. The RAV4 first generation comes in at number 10 on the list. I even think it might have become a little bit of a collector's item if you can get a low mileage one in good condition, but it really does have something a little bit different. Moving to number 9 on the list for top soft roaders that can go off-road, we've got another first generation, because with a lot of these cars, the first generations were the best off-road, and they gradually got more and more watered down as they went along. Number 9, CRV first generation. So they were 3 years behind the RAV4, but they put out a hell of a good product. Exceptional build quality, same size 2-liter engine, Honda reliability through and through. Honda and Toyota really are at the top of the game in terms of reliability a lot of the time. Also has the spare wheel on the back of the car, which is a sign of a fairly good off-roader. It's also great if you get a puncture, you don't have to, if your spare tire's all the way at the bottom below your boot liner, you have to get all your luggage out to be able to pull that spare tire out. So having the wheel on the back is a real advantage if you're planning on taking it on gravel. Number 8 on the list, to break up the Japanese party, we've thrown in the Land Rover Freelander 1. This was Land Rover's response to this mushrooming soft roader industry that they hadn't at that stage in 97 been a part of. So they bought the Freelander in at the same time as the CRV, and a lot of people have said that saved Land Rover from bankruptcy, because they needed something to punch in the lower end markets that were growing as the traditional off-road markets were going in different directions. It's got the 2-liter BMW turbo diesel engine, which is the one to go for. Do not touch the petrol version of the Freelander 1. Some mechanics, even Land Rover mechanics, say they won't work on it. So top tip, go for the diesel if you're going to go for the Freelander 1. Number 7 on the list is the 5th generation Subaru Outback. You might think, what's an Outback doing on a soft roaders that can off-road section? Well, hang on. On the 5th generation of the Outback, they put 220 mils of ground clearance on, which is approaching what most Buckies start off with, and is more than the Jeep Grand Cherokee of the time. So you really can't go wrong with that Outback. It's got the Subaru bulletproof reliability. It comes in a V6, which is very, very powerful, and the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder, which is the same as you get in the Forester. Both engines are really good. It being a station wagon, you can put a decent payload on there. If you're going to do more serious off-roading, I'd give it a lift, put some bigger tires on, bash plate, and you could really go most grade 2 approaching grade 3 off-road, no problem whatsoever. That's number 7 on the list, the 5th generation Subaru Outback. Number 6 on the list. It's a bit of a grudge purchase, this one, for me to put it on the list. I'm not a great fan of Reynolds, but I've got to give credit where credit's due in terms of off-roading. The Reynolds Duster. It shares a lot of the same hardware as the Nissan X-Trail in terms of 4x4 system, so you can get that locking center diff, which makes a lot of difference. Departure angles are good on this car. It's light, it's nimble, which makes it particularly good off-road. You're not going to do grade 4 or grade 5 on this, but your average grade 1, 2 approaching 3, if you've got better tires and a bit of a lift on here, is going to do you rather well. Reliability on Renault is a little bit iffy, but they do have good turbo diesel engines. I think it's a 1.5 in there that gives you very good fuel economy. I would just keep it, I would buy it new and run it while it's in service plan, but hey, that's just me. Moving swiftly on to the top 5 on the best soft roaders that can go off-road of all time. You got another Japanese car. They just seem to be everywhere. The Mitsubishi Outlander, the first generation or the second generation, is really good off-road. The first generation looks kind of similar to the first generation CRV. It's got 211 mils of clearance, which is very good. The second generation has 216 millimeters of clearance, which is even better. Both of them have the similar all-wheel drive system to the Nissan X-Trail, so you can go front-wheel drive, intelligent four-wheel drive where the computer decides where the power is going, and you can lock it on the center diff. I mean, it's not a true center diff, but I found it makes a big difference on very loose rocky conditions. Moving swiftly on, we have at number 4 the 2005 Subaru Forester. Bulletproof reliability. It has that great Subaru all-wheel drive system that was first put on the map by the Impreza in the WRC World Rally Championships. It has decent clearance of over 200 mils. You can definitely put bigger tires on here. It has like a cheat low range where you pull one button and it changes the revs at low speed to give you more power. So I wouldn't call it a true low range gearbox where you have sort of 5 or 6 different options in low range. This is just what I'd call it a soft road low range. It's not like the Grand Vitara low range, so to speak. I'd put it on a lower level than that. As a result, the Forester sneaks in number 4 position on our best soft roaders that can go off road. The Forester, especially the early generations, have got quite a cult following with greenies and bunny huggers and people that like to wear tweed and fat flannel, which I don't mind at all. They're good cars, especially the first generation Forester with the 2 liters, also very good, also very good, solid off-road. You can't go wrong with one of those. The reason it doesn't go higher is the ground clearance is still a bit of a limiting factor on this car, only around 200 mils. Number 3 on the list, getting to the business end, the top 3. Yet again, another Japanese car. But hey, they've got this segment of the market cornered. You could say they invented this segment of the market. You got the Daihatsu Terios 4x4. It's a little bit smaller than some of its competition, but it can punch well above its weight. It's got great ground clearance of 220 mils. It doesn't have a low range gearbox, but it has a strong 1.5. I think it's a VVTi 16 valve petrol, solid chassis, kind of go anywhere truck without low range. I could see this car with the correct tires on, with a 2-inch lift, you could do grade 3, no problem whatsoever in the Daihatsu Terios. And you can get them quite cheap. Daihatsu is owned by Toyota, so you get that Toyota reliability as well. The one thing for our South African viewers, Daihatsu pulled out of the country a few years ago, so going forward, long-term spares might be a bit of an issue, but I see a lot of them on the road, so it can't be that bad. Number 2 on the list, finally the Japanese stronghold of this countdown is broken. We got something. Well, the name badge originally came from the good old UK. The first soft roader that Land Rover put out. let's go with the second generation of that. It's got better ground clearance. It's got best in class boot space. It's got great Land Rover traction control and off-road ability. It's got 210 mils clearance out the box, but it's got a big space between the tires and the wheel arches, so you could definitely go up a tire size or two and get up to sort of at least a 220-230 mils of clearance. It's arguably the best off-road out of the true soft roaders with no low range, but the reason it doesn't come number one is that Land Rover reliability, and when you're out in the middle of the bush, you don't want that in the back of the mind. But on paper, I'd say this is the best soft roader that can go off-road with no low range and no pure body on frame. But for me, reliability is always going to be number one, which leads me to number one. Drum roll, the Nissan X-Trail T31. That's the second incarnation. The first incarnation was good, but the second incarnation was better. When they were designing the second X-Trail, there was no Pathfinder at the time, so they made the X-Trail bigger. They stiffened the chassis. They made the wheels a bit bigger. They increased the ground clearance. They added a few nice off-road touches to the car. So there's drawers at the back. There's big windows. The driver's seat actually goes up and down when you're driving on rough gravel. So the whole car can soak up the action. Not a surprise. It's a car that I own. I've had it for the last 5 years. I've taken it on thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers of gravel. The first thing I did was put some decent all-terrain tires on, Goodyear Wrangler Kevlars. I think I've only had one puncture in about 30,000 Ks, but I've hammered this car to hell and back. The one weak point on it is the front suspension. I've had to change that twice, but in terms of the actual frame, it's rock solid. All the doors line up straight, loads of room. It comes out of the factory with tinted windows, which is great for kids on long distance trips. The engine is Ace A1A. The 2.5 petrol on that is it just goes and goes and goes. Great overtaking. You can do 200 kilometers an hour on it. It's not, if you drive 120, 110, you can do 8-9 kilometers per 100 Ks. And it's got that Nissan reliability. Well, Nissan reliability before Renault had too much influence and has watered down the current rounder shape of the X-Trail, which I wouldn't necessarily touch. So there you have it. Slightly controversial, very subjective. Let me know what you think below in the comments. What is your top 10 list for soft roaders that you can bang off road? Catch you next time on Africa Sideways. I think it would be rude for me not to have some special mentions at this stage. There is an argument whether the Suzuki Grand Vitara is a soft roader or a hard roader. It's got a monocoque hybrid chassis, but it does have a low range gearbox. That's why I didn't get on the list. But in terms of pure off-road ability, that is the best, the Grand Vitara, on the pure fact that it's got the low range. In terms of suspension, it's very similar to the X-Trail. The X-Trail has got more space and is more luxurious, but it doesn't have that low range gearbox. But unfortunately, the Grand Vitara doesn't make the list. It might make another list coming shortly. And you can't forget the Santa Fe first generation, which was body on frame, tough as teak, but it's just that body on frame puts it out of this race. But it looks quite cool. It looks a bit dorky, but there's something special about that first generation Santa Fe, and it's rock solid. And the Hyundai Tucson, the first generation, it's got about 200 mils of clearance, but good departure and entry angles, and solid as a rock. There you go. Bing.